after 2 years, our first session also offline, but I would like to say hello all the online dear attendees. We are starting our first day of talks. We will have one more in October in Vienna. Now we are streaming from Prague. And I would like to share a few details before we really start. And I'm just waiting for my slides. So first one, we would like to collect all the questions and feedback via Slido app. It's easier to have one channel for offline and online audience. So if you have any questions, please use this QR code or just type TFO like a Tesena Fest Online 2020 and you can raise your questions. Speakers will read it then for us and answer them if they have enough time. If not, then we could discuss online on social media networks or for the offline audience here over the coffee. The second slide, before we start, I would like to invite our three awesome speakers, Pia, Maravan, and Phil. They'll do the proper introduction, not like me, because I believe they will be better, and I just don't want to slow the stream down for you. So welcome and enjoy. Pia, stage is yours.
Hi everyone, and welcome also from my side. We are today in beautiful Prague, and I couldn't wait to be there with you. So as said, my name is Pia, and I work as a QA consultant and coach for Zülke in Switzerland in Zurich. I'm here today, yes, because Marcel invited me. That's one reason, and I think it's a very good one. But even more, I'm here because I really like to share my knowledge and my experiences. So I brought for you today my most important learnings of one of my past projects. And I will also share the mistakes we've made. So hopefully you don't need to repeat them again. And as much as I like to share my experience, I also like to exchange knowledge and experience. So I'm already very keen to hear your thoughts and your questions and your feedback. And I do my very best so that we will have time after my presentation, and I'm really looking forward to that exchange with you. And now, let's have a look at the story that I'd like to share with you today. I joined the project in February 2019, shortly after I joined Zülke. So it was my very first project for my new employer. So you can imagine, I was quite excited to get started. One of my development colleagues called me in due to quality issues in that project. At that time, I didn't know that this guy, his name is Andy, would become my strongest ally and actually my partner in crime. It was at the private bank in Zurich. Yes, I know it's kind of a cliche, but if you come to Zurich and look for a job, chances are pretty high that you end up in a bank. So it was at that private bank, and the application the team was developing was an internal one, mainly for relationship managers and investment advisors. And what they did with the application was pretty simple. They advised their clients, they managed their client books, and they did actual trading for them. The application contained the various components or contexts. So of course, there was a front-end, back-end, data services, and a whole bunch of interfaces with surrounding systems. At the beginning, the team consisted of around about 60 people from various disciplines. And it grew to around about 80 people in 2.5, 3 years. most of the team members were developers, and development was organized in Agile teams. And when I joined, it was a bit funny. You know, I've been called in due to quality issues, right? And I came there, and then there was no official description or name for my role or my position. I'd just been told, you should focus on the quality issues on the development side, and please, don't mess with the test team. The test team? Yeah, the test team. There was a separate test team. And as they were separate, of course, they did not sit in the same big room office as the team, but in a different room across the hallway. And that felt really strange to me, especially because the project claimed to be organized in an agile way. And I very quickly found out that this working in agile ways was only valid for the development teams. So the official testing part still followed good old waterfall. So what was the result? Feedback on product quality threw back far too late, very slow, and it was all pretty cumbersome. And there I came with my brilliant solution. Testers into the teams right now. And although maybe you or maybe some of you might agree and say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, at that point in time in that project, it only met with very little joy, but with really lots of skepticism and sometimes even really destructive behavior. And then I learned, and I wasn't aware of that before, that there had already been attempts in the past to have testers in the teams. But those folks, they turned out to be nagging and criticizing and even sometimes blocking their teammates. So guess what? They got dismissed pretty quickly again from the teams. But I thought, okay, I mean, it can't be that just because some people made some bad experience in the past with some other people that I let down my idea that easily. It was too obvious for me. It was too obvious that this change in team composition, it could change everything, and it could change it for the better. I truly believe every single one brings his or her very specific and own skills to the table. And that's exactly the point. So I told them, come on, folks, we have to give it another try. But this time, let's look for, you know, a good fit, a good match, that we have the right testers for the right team. So, and still then, they were like, okay, yeah, why not? But they still challenged my idea. But I was prepared. You know, I came up with some nice facts and figures on how to measure the success of having testers in the teams. So there were things like, we will find the bugs at the earlier stages, where it's much, much cheaper to fix them, right? So we will have less production incidents, we will reduce our overall product risk, we will have happier users, we will have better test coverage and better test cases. And they liked that. So with that, I got not only project management on client side to approve my idea, I also got others like product owners and developers to be interested in it. So they were open for it and they wanted to give it a try. So that was pretty cool. And then finally, the official go was given. You know, I had the green light. So I grabbed my buddy, Andy, who called me in, and I said, come on, let's go to the testers. Let's see who's the first one willing to join a team. Yeah, you know what comes. Well, they were not as excited as we were. Not at all. And yeah, some might now say, okay, but that could have been obvious. It wasn't obvious to me at that point, because the testers, only very, very few of them had experienced what happened in the past by themselves. So most of them only heard about it, but that was enough. So they were not willing to give it a try. So we were like, okay, well, we let them stay where they are, at least for the time being. Maybe when they see how that new role works, let's see, after some time, maybe they change their minds. And maybe we need them to keep things running. Could be. So we started again to look for testers to join the team, but this time we looked for externals. And those of you who ever did recruiting themselves, they will know how super hard it can be to find the right person for a specific role or position. It felt like ages that I spent with scanning applications and reading CVs over and over again. But finally, after some time, we were lucky, and we found at least the first 2 testers, so we could get started with the first 2 teams. Me and my friend, we always thought that for Agile teams, it's not a big deal to organize themselves. It shouldn't be. That's what we thought. Even more, we thought our teams in our project, there are so many senior people, they are so mature, they will find their ways easily. What a wrong assumption. I tell you what happened when the testers joined. The most mature teams, they were lost, completely lost. And I got approached with so many questions, like, so, yeah, cool, so what to do now with the testers, and what their job should be, and their responsibilities. And by the way, how should we collaborate with each other? And I could hardly understand the issue. And to be very honest with you, I was also kind of upset with the testers, because I thought at least they would know their job, and they would be capable to define their role in the team themselves. But again, a very wrong assumption. So I had to spend quite some time with defining guidelines and rules with the testers and their teams, how they should collaborate with each other. And that got me quite overloaded. And I was so overloaded and so busy with keeping the idea, with keeping my dream alive, that I did not realize not everybody was fully committed. Not everybody shared the same vision. In autumn 2019, surprisingly, our loudest critic, that was the test manager, and he decided to leave the project. From one day to the other, he got offered another one, which he liked more. And I was like, yes, this is it. Now it's our turn. Now it's time to change the world. Not. I'll tell you what happened. So me and my friend, we were already, we spent already quite some time in thinking about this, how this new organization could work with the embedded testers and how collaboration will look like in the teams, but also across the teams. So we had already kind of a plan in our minds. So while we conducted a workshop with the testers, we made a mistake. We missed to actually listen to them. We missed to listen to their needs and to their sometimes even unspoken fears. So if you ever come to a similar situation, remember my words, don't forget the people. Because if you do forget, I can guarantee you, it will fire back on you. And it fired back on us pretty hardly. So in the end, there were really two people started really to betray and to block us behind our backs. So not a very nice situation. I can't really recommend that. And on top of that, to make things even worse, we've all been through that, COVID hit the world. And there was this huge uncertainty there, basically from one moment to the other, right? And all of us got sent to home office, and you had no more direct connection with your teammates. And a result of this crisis was also a huge budget cut in the bank where our project was. And with that budget cut, my role got cut. That was the point where I was really like, okay, that was it. Time to give up. Not for me. So I changed my approach. And I thought, okay, fine, if my overarching role will not be there in the future, then why not going into a team myself? And instead of telling them how that new embedded role should work, I will show them in everyday life how it works. Looking back, that was the best decision I could take. For the project, but even more for myself. So shortly after, I found myself in the only team without any front-end components. And the funny thing is, until then, my testing career was basically on the graphical user interface. So I was a front-end tester. I was pretty good in that, but yeah, if you're in a team without front-end, might be challenging. And it was, but it turned out to be a really good thing. So the fact that I could not test independently, especially in the early stages, forced the whole team to work more closely together and to try out new things and new approaches. And I very quickly found out or realized that I could support my new team much more with my experience in smart test design, with reviewing things, with teaching them testing techniques, asking critical questions. I could support them more with those things instead of doing actual test execution. So as we, as a team, experienced that huge value of interdisciplinary teamwork and pair work, we thought, why not taking it a step further? So we decided to introduce behavior-driven development, or BDD, also known as specification by example. And BDD brought us, first of all, it brought us a huge boost and a common language. And that common language was Gherkin. So pretty simple syntax. Given an initial condition, when a specific action occurs, then a specific result is expected. So that simple thing made the whole team understand the requirements and the related test scenarios more clearly than ever before. So independent of our disciplines, we had that full understanding. And another cool thing was those test scenarios we could use on basically every test level. So already starting from the unit test level onwards. And for me as embedded tester, that was great because I always knew what my development colleagues had already implemented on the lower test levels. And that knowledge, that transparency enabled me to reduce my manual test cases by 60%. 60%, I mean, that was huge. That was just awesome. It freed up so much of my resources. So for the first time in my career, I could really contribute with my skills from the very beginning. And I could drive built-in quality. And finally, I had the time to really do exploratory testing. And it was really cool. I enjoyed it. It's much fun. But please note, behavior-driven development does not replace any standard testing. So when you think about using behavior-driven development, always think about where and on which test level it really makes sense, and where, let's say, a standard unit test might be the better option. So in my team, no matter whether we had test scenarios following Gherkin syntax or any other testing in place, we always had this very close and immediate collaboration. And all of us had this quality mindset in us. So we always wanted to improve, to get better, so we constantly reflected on ourselves, and we also challenged the approaches we were following, the processes, the tools, and when we found out that this or that is not valuable for us anymore, we also threw things away. And that, in combination with the smart usage of automation and pipelines, that made us really successful and pretty fast. So only after a few months, my team was the role model for interdisciplinary teamwork and for quality assurance in the project. And it happened what I was hoping for. The testers from the test team, they got more interested in that new role because they saw, that looks like fun. And so it was cool that we didn't find enough externals at the beginning, so we still had teams without embedded testers, so the interested ones could join a team too. In the meantime, the bank decided to transform the whole organization towards SAFe, so Scaled Agile Framework. And that was, on one hand, that was super cool for us because it fully supported our approach of having testers in the teams and of building in quality. But on the other hand, it brought up the question, so what to do now with the testers outside of the teams? And we still had some of those for a good reason, but still the question came up. And in that regard, I urge you to, please, do not follow blindly what the framework says. No poster, no template can ever map all the specifics of your organization, of your team, of your project. So for us, everyone found their place in the new organization. And we did not kick out anybody just because, for instance, there is no test manager on the framework's poster. So what? So there are many cool approaches and frameworks out there. What I want you to remember is just take what really makes sense for your organization, and what doesn't make sense, just leave it out. So as said, for us, everyone found their place. And we lived happily ever after. I would love to say yes. Well, don't forget the time frame such a transition takes. So in the end, it turned out to be good for us that the testers from the testing were not excited about my idea in the first place, because it was really like we thought. We needed them to stay where they are. We needed them to keep things running while transforming the teams. So the first 2 ones and then another one, and so on and so forth. It didn't take long, and my team and my project was kind of a poster child beyond project boundaries. So the whole bank, people heard about us, and they talked about us, and they approached us and asked about our secret. And some might say now, it was behavior-driven development or automation. Well, that all helped, yes, but it always takes the right people, the right mix of people with the right skills, and even more important, the willingness of every single one to pull together, especially when things are not going so well. So when transforming, the 3 things to keep in mind are: change needs supporters. You need strong allies. You need a partner in crime. I could not have achieved what I have achieved without my ally, without my awesome teammates. So change is a team effort. People ask for guidance. Also the senior ones, also the mature ones. So be prepared and have some guidelines, some guardrails, some templates ready to support them. But don't forget to leave room for individual implementation and always provide supportive culture and structure. Change doesn't happen overnight. So focus on your big goal, and time is on your side. Said that, I hope you like my story about how the transformation from waterfall testing to agile quality assurance can look like, and I hope to see you all at the other side of the waterfall. Thank you. So, questions? Let's see. I mean, I'll be there afterwards as well. It's. Oh wow, cool.
Yes. No.
Thank you. The next plan for them. Okay, thank you. Awesome presentation. Yes, thank you. What's your next plans for the team? Do they know what to do as agile developers? Next plans. Do I have an echo? Next plans. Well, I think we could automate more smart. Because for me, till we have still too many manual testing in place, which I would just delete, and others just want to automate that thing, so we can improve there. So this is definitely on the list. Do they know what to do as agile developers? Yeah, we are pretty lucky, I have to say. Developers in that project are very, very open, motivated, interested to learn things maybe outside of their discipline, not only QA and testing stuff, also they are interested in business analysis, for example. So I would say yes, let's say 90% of them know what to do, and the rest they will learn. We'll show them. How long did the transformation take? Long. I'm not the most patient person, so the patience is not my strong suit, I have to say. But yeah, just give the people enough time. It's, for example, for the testers, it was a huge change in their role. What they did for years and decades, it changed completely. So it takes time to get familiar, and see that there's no reason to be afraid. So that was one thing, but also for the developers, especially for the ones with more experience who also worked in the job already for quite some time, it was the same thing, just on the other side. So for us, I would say it helped definitely when I went into the team, because then, like, after, let's say, 3-4 months, the rest of the project was like, okay, cool, we also want an embedded tester. We also want to work like this. But before, I spent, like, let's say, 6 months explaining stuff, and it felt for me like a marathon without, you know, I never reached the finish line. So, yeah. Take enough time. Don't rush, because if you miss to have the people with you, then yeah, I don't see that this will be a success. So better take the time, make a step back, and get the people with you. What do you consider as first steps people should do to improve Agile testing? Talk to each other. Talk to other roles, just be open, be interested in what other disciplines are doing. So it helped a lot for us, and for me personally, when I just went to developer, whether it was in the office at that time or just remotely saying, hey, can we just have, I don't know, 10 minutes and you show me what you're doing? And then in the end, that person was so happy that I was interested in their work that it ended up being like a walkthrough of a cool new feature for an hour or so. So, yeah, that would be the first I recommend. And from there, start from there. It always depends where the people you're working with, where they are. Yeah, so get them where they are and then build your strategy from there. Did you use some workshop for the testers before you tried to transform them to Agile? Example, Agile developer from Scrum, Agile tester, knowledge for ISTQB. Yeah, not an official one. We did like, it's also always a budget thing, right? We tried to design something ourselves, yeah? But basically, yeah, it was what's testing or what's quality assurance, and then what's Scrum. We worked in Scrum teams and just bringing this together. Yes, we tried that, and it sometimes works. What did the testers outside the teams do? Very, very good question. Thanks for asking that. As said, there were a whole bunch of interfaces with surrounding systems. So our application, the relationship manager, they did actually trading for their clients. And it was a private bank, so you can guess there was a lot of money involved and a very high-risk application. So system integration, you know, the whole end-to-end flow was super, super important. And within the Agile teams, as our application was also quite big, we focused more on what the teams were building. You know, they were all responsible for their own context in the application. So we focused in the Agile teams on the things they were building and also the connection. So in all the Agile teams was basically our application in itself. And tested against mocks mainly, and then testers outside of the teams, they focused really on that integration into the bank with the real interfaces and with the production-like test data. That was very important. We would love to give more responsibility for that to the teams, but we're working on it. It's also a matter of who's allowed to enter certain environments in the bank, who is allowed to see certain data. That was the issue there. Do you still have a test manager? Yes, but it's and I don't really like the word manager, but I know what, it's not what it used to be. So it's more someone who's, you know, organizing or having like the big picture. Because as said, it's a huge application. We have a lot of dependencies. So it's good to have someone, yeah, he's called test manager, but, you know, orchestrating all that things. Also checking with other applications, releases, dependencies, that stuff. So yes, we do. How do you deal with regression testing? A lot of it is automated, but still, coming back to what I said at the beginning, we still have, for me, too many manual regression tests. Yeah, people don't like to delete stuff. I love to delete stuff. Yeah, so we focus, we try to automate as much as it makes sense, and focusing on really system integration. So we have Tosca there in place, which works pretty good for us. Agile teams require skilled testers, yes. How do you develop your testers on the fly? Are they all open to improving themselves, and what if not? That's a nice one. We try to, when recruiting people, we try really to find out as good as we can, are they willing to improve themselves? Are they willing to change, how do they deal with when there is no job description? So when they come into a team and they need to find out, or you know, just be the quality voice or so. So we really look for, yeah, people who can organize themselves, who can define their role themselves. Yeah, to be honest, sometimes it doesn't work, but we made very good experience with coaching, with training people, with changing teams. That also works. Sometimes it's just not working in a certain team, and when you change it, then surprisingly it works. So, yeah. How many testers are in your team? So I understand this as in the project. So we had 6 teams. So 6 were embedded, and then we had another 4 outside of the team. So 10, and the test manager, the new one. We had a new one who was open for that idea. What tools do you use in your team for automation? Yeah, so for end-to-end, we were using Tosca, and then what in the teams, they used a lot, like for the front end Selenium. Some used Cypress because they preferred it more, so we let them freedom to choose. It's just, yeah, you need to, some tools you need to check whether you are allowed to use it in the bank or on which environment you are allowed to use it, but we try to give the teams as much freedom as possible there so they can really work most efficiently. Thank you.
Perfect. What an inspiring presentation from Pia. Not sure how I will follow up with that. But let's give it a try. So I'm going to talk about testing in the cloud. And it may sound very technical, but I have dumbed it down enough so that even all the managers can understand. So just a quick question. Who here thinks that AI is going to help you in your work in the near future? Raise of hand. Oh, some people. Cool. Careful, might take over your job. So for this presentation, I wanted to try something. I found one of those smart AI tools online where it can basically generate text for you. So I went to it and I asked it that question. Why is software testing in the cloud hard? And this is the answer it gave me. I'm basically going to read out loud what it says, so you don't have to. Cloud-based software testing can be hard for a number of reasons. For one thing, the cloud is a completely different environment from traditional testing environment, which can make it difficult to replicate conditions accurately. In addition, cloud-based applications are often constantly changing and evolving, which can make it difficult to keep up with the latest changes and ensure that all test cases are still relevant. So let's see how smart that AI tool is and if it's right or wrong at the end of the presentation. And one funny note thing is that most of the images that I have on some of my slides, they have been generated using that AI tool DALL-E 2, which is really cool. Basically give it a piece of text, which I have written down there, and it generates an image for you based on that. So something fun to look at if you don't want to listen to me. So, hi, my name is Maron. I am a test lead at Soundtracky brand located in Sweden. I have been working with testing for the last 15 years. And every day I struggle with the question, am I testing the product right? Which is something most of the testers should think about every day. And what I love to do is to travel to all corners of Earth. Now, during my 15 years, I have done everything from manual testing to test design to writing test specification to test automation to leading test teams. So in those 15 years, I have to say, I like it better in the good old days. You know, when we had waterfall model, big advocate of the waterfall model. Sorry, Pia. But I believe that Scrum and Kanban and Agile, those are all glorified waterfall models. And also, test automation, that's a scam. I mean, you write your test and then spend half of your time maintaining that test. There's not so much automation in that. And then I would also consider myself a very conservative tester and also very close-minded tester. So with that said, it's up to you to think about if what I said is a joke or not, or if I really mean it. So for those of you who don't want to listen to me rambling on for the next 30 minutes, this is basically the summary of the takes of what I'm going to say. So testing in the cloud doesn't change the fundamentals of testing. And by saying that, I may have rendered this whole presentation obsolete. It means useless, Phil. So testing in the cloud is more complex in a different way, okay? And don't use AI. So that's basically it. Those of you who want to do some wine testing or chocolate testing, go ahead. I'm going to start here and talk for the next 30 minutes. So let's ask you another question. How many have worked with a cloud-based application? It could be directly cloud-based application or partially cloud-based. A couple of hands. Cool. Then you can all tell me, what is the cloud? I'll spare you from that. I'll tell you. I have, as I said, made it very, very simple. It's a lot more complex than that. But let's start from the bottom layer, which is infrastructure as a service, which is basically the physical computers or the storage or the networking routers. And then on top of that, you have the platform as a service, which could be the OS that is running, Windows, Linux, virtual machines, or whatever. And then we have the top layer, which is most of the time the application that you will be developing or using A simple example of a software as a service is like Netflix or Gmail or Office 360. And that is also where I work also. We provide a music service, which is a service, a software as a service to our client. And with this infrastructure that cloud providers provide, which can be like Google or Amazon or Microsoft, the only thing you have to do is write your code, test your code, deploy your code, and your vendor will handle the rest of it. So if we take a step back again and see how it was in the good old days, we used to spend like a year, 6 months developing an application and testing that application for a year or something. And then after that, we'll take that huge application that we have developed and we bring it to the customer and install it and say, goodbye, see you again in 6 months. And then someone thought of like, okay, these developers and testers, they are not working hard enough. Let's change that a bit. Let's make it so that we have smaller teams where they develop more smaller functions or microservices, and they will design it, write the code for it, they will test it, they will deploy it, they will support it, they will maintain it, and basically everything. And most of these microservices are deployed in the cloud. So what does that mean, testing in the cloud, really? What has changed there? So let's start with the fundamentals. How many of you here have heard of the testing pyramid or a test pyramid? Oh, good. Those of you who haven't heard of it should not be here. It's the basic standard for all the testing. So as we know, we have our unit test in the bottom. We have on top of that a little bit less of integration tests, and at the top, end-to-end tests. Now, what is the difference when you are running a cloud application? Absolutely nothing. The fundamentals have not changed. In fact, we, from our own experience at Soundtrack, we have seen that unit tests are very important in cloud applications. And we're going to see the reasons why, but mainly because if you want to test something end-to-end in a cloud application, it's a lot harder because there's so much dependencies on different services in the cloud. So you need to get your unit tests in order so that you can at least verify that the core functionality still works. And a cloud application is much more dynamic. It changes a lot, which makes it a bit more complex than a traditional environment that you would host on your own. But I think by carefully planning your tests and designing your tests, you can easily overcome these challenges. So let's take a look at what kind of different test is more applied in the cloud environment than the traditional, like a local application. So we have what we talked about, the unit test and the end-to-end test, could be system test or integration test. But there are other tests also that we can run in the cloud. If we start with the basic functionality test, which is just basically making sure the application does what it's supposed to do. And there's nothing different there. But the thing that we have noticed is that when you are developing an application for the cloud, even though you can simulate it and you run it and you test it locally, it still differs when you deploy it in the cloud, because it's still a different environment. And also, if you have clients using your cloud application from many different devices, it could be like different browsers or different hardware devices, then you need to have to think about the compatibility of all these devices. And then, of course, security, which is more relevant in a cloud applications. And this is could be a little bit hard, actually, because you need to have more specialized knowledge when it comes to security. We've all heard about the security breaches that has happened where passwords have leaked or emails or sensitive data that have leaked. So you'll need to have some testers who have specialized knowledge to cover all those loopholes that that you may find in your cloud application. And this is something also normal testers should learn a bit more about if they are working in the cloud environment. And then when it comes to reliability testing, there's a lot to cover in reliability testing, but basically making sure that your application is always online and functioning. And that could be done with several types of tests. And it could be like load testing, where it's not about like increasing the load on your application and see if it's still working, but it's more of trying to understand the behavior of your application when it's under a specific load and see if it does what it's expected to do. And if it doesn't, like where is the bottleneck, what is happening? And together with the, like a stress test, where you set like the load on a specific level and see if the system can handle that. And another thing is like soak test, which is basically like system test, but you define a limit, a capacity, and you can see if your application is able to maintain that during a specific amount of time. And of course, the spike test could be like on Black Friday, when you have a lot of visitors coming in at once, and you have to make sure that your application is able to handle that. Scalability. Now that is a fun one, because everybody wants to run their application in the cloud just because it is easy to scale. But you have to think about, you don't have an infinite amount of machines unless you have an infinite amount of money, because it actually does cost for everything that you use in the cloud. If you are reading from a database or writing to it, or just deploying new machines, new instances, everything costs. So you need to be able to scale in a healthy manner. So say, for example, that you have a lot of traffic coming in at once, and then you start scaling up, but your scaling up takes like 2 minutes. But all the requests that have come in, they have already been processed by your existing machines while the other machines were scaling up. So basically, that was not healthy, because you have just paid more for the machines that you just scaled up, and your existing machines handled the load during that specific time. So what we are trying to do always is just to balance of how many machines we have compared to how much we can handle. So a good test might be that you have an application that is reading a file from a file storage. Would a good test be to see if we can read that file? What do you say, Phil? Would that be a good test? Yes? Wrong. That would not be a good test, because what you are doing is you're trying to test the infrastructure itself. This is something that the cloud provider provides for you. What you should be testing instead is maybe the content of that file that you are trying to read. So we have to make a difference here between testing in the cloud and testing off the cloud. And that is actually not very easy. Because essentially, you are already paying your cloud provider to facilitate the hardware and the system for you. And you're paying for that, so you should just assume that it works. But you should test your application, how it behaves in that environment. So, one of the most important things that we are always constantly working with, and this would be one of the most important takeaways from this entire presentation, is that bugs will always exist in your applications. It's just a matter of time when you find it or a customer finds it. But what is most important is actually being able to handle incidents. And incidents, it can be that something goes down at your cloud provider. It could be like a server goes down, the internal network goes down, or something else, like Cloudflare goes down. And you have to be able to recover from that state. And you have to understand, okay, if something goes down in a specific service of mine, am I going to lose any data? And if I do, will I be able to recover that data? And when the system is back online, will it be in a weird state where I manually have to clean it up? So we spend a lot of time and resources trying to understand how our application will work if some other part of the system is not working, is not functioning. We have seen more and more times where one part of the system goes down, a load on another system that was depending on it goes suddenly up, because maybe it's taking in a lot of requests, but no one is processing these requests. And one way to work with the incidents or to simulate incidents is like running Chaos Monkey, which is actually really fun. I'm still trying to make the developers at my company do it, which is basically you go into your production environment and you turn off a service. See what happens. Will your customers notice anything? How will your different systems behave? Are you going to get the alerts that you expect if this was a real scenario? And then you take it back up online. So that's a really fun test, but you have to be prepared for it. And it's even more fun if you have a dedicated team that can turn it off without anybody knowing and see how the other teams will handle that. But there's also one thing that is good about having applications in the cloud, and that is that you can also run your tests in the cloud. And that has actually a lot more benefits than if you would run your tests locally. Basically, because you have more computing power available. You can run more tests, you can cover more, and the most important thing is that you can get a lot of feedback faster. And I think all developers appreciate when they don't have to wait a long time to get feedback about their applications that they have deployed. And also testing in the cloud, it simulates, to some extent, the production environment, which is equally as important. But you have also to think about if you are testing something in the cloud, and are you running it in production environment? Because you have to isolate it. So, for example, if you are testing a new payment system, you should make sure that it doesn't do some actual real payments just because you are testing in the simulated environment. And also, what I mentioned is that it's very cheap to add more tests in the cloud because you can always scale up. And when you don't need your machines, you scale down. So you only pay for what you use. And another good thing which I spend a lot of my time on is basically looking at logs and metrics from our application. And that is one of the ways that we find a lot of bugs. Just by monitoring the logs and metrics, we can detect different behavior between different versions. And when you're running your test in the cloud, you can also maybe run several different versions of the application at the same time. So what do you do when you find bugs in your application? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, you have access to a lot more data if you're running your application in the cloud. But one important thing is that you have to make sure when it is developed that you're able to trace everything that happens in the cloud. Because if you see something goes wrong and you're not able to trace back where it came from, because usually a cloud environment is between, you have a request that comes in, and it jumps between services, and then it ends up somewhere. And if somewhere where you find the bug, you need to be able to trace it back and what happened in different services. And that puts a lot of emphasis on the developers and the testers to make sure that they are able to trace what happens in the cloud environment. So, some things that developers and maybe testers do forget some time when they are working with applications that are running in the cloud. We're all thinking that the network is always going to be there, which is not true. We have many incidents where the network has gone down between services. That latency is basically zero which is not. Nothing has zero latency, and that you have as much bandwidth as you infinite amount of bandwidth. But you have to think about that bandwidth in a cloud environment might cost you money. So you don't want to shuffle data between services. It's not for free. And you shouldn't assume that the network is always secure. And this is actually up to your admin to make sure that it's secure, but also have to understand in a cloud environment, there's probably not only one admin. Everybody, or almost anybody, can go in and configure something or open a port, which they shouldn't. And that is a tough one. And as I mentioned, transport cost is not zero. Basically, everything you do in the cloud does cost you money. So what are some of the challenges of testing a software as a service? Well, the main thing that everybody wants from it is faster delivery. But there's also the balance that you have to take between faster delivery and code quality. You have to know when you need to put your foot down and say, no, the quality is not good enough, and we have to stop the delivery. And one of the other challenges which we have run into a couple of times is that the environment is very dynamic, meaning that our cloud provider can anytime update one of our services that we are running on, which might introduce some bugs, because they don't always know how the changes that they do will affect our service that is running on that application. We've had one instance, actually, where our cloud provider, they updated something in the database, which made all of our dates like 0. It was null. And that is something that they introduced a bug from their side, but we have had to be able to handle that. So what we did in that instance is that we had to take a backup, which one was 1 day old. So you never know what will happen in a cloud environment. And then there are a lot of things that you can see when your application is running. A lot of logs. And the DevOps teams, what they are doing all the time, except for deploying the applications, is also monitoring the logs, which is the same thing that we will do in the QA team, making sure that everything runs smoothly. And they will also set up alarms and dashboards and the environments that the code is running in. So all of that is actually something that we in the QA department would like to use also. We're also going to deploy applications. And we also want to say the same environment as the production and the same dashboards. And we want to set our own alarms and checks and the same logs. So what do I do sometimes? I actually let the DevOps team develop all of that. And I just take it from them, copy-paste into our testing environment, and just change some configuration. So that way, we will have almost the same environment as the production environment, but we didn't have to do most of the job to set up that environment. And when it comes to logs, you have to be able to see the noise or the signal from all the noise, and what kind of technology is best suited to do that. Well, I hear that machine learning is quite good at it. But we have to think about this machine learning and AI. For us testers, we need tools that support us, not to try and take over our jobs, which is really not possible yet. The tools need to be able to help us think in an analytical way, or maybe solve some complex environment in a more simple way. Because that's what the machine learning is good at, taking a large amount of data, and we can check exactly what we want from that data. And we have to see where do these tools fit in our process, in how we work. And can these AI tools help us with the maintenance? For example, there are tools that do some AI web testing, like interface testing. And one of these tools, they can detect if someone have simply just changed a text of a button. And because just simply changing a text of a button doesn't necessarily mean that the test case have failed. It just means it's just a minor modification, and the test is still valid. We have also to understand that all of these AI tools and machine learning tools, they have been trained on a specific type of data. That means that they are biased to that data. They were only as good as the data that they have been trained on. So for this presentation, I wanted to try a little something. And I wanted to create a little application. Now, where is Phil? He's gone. Good for him, because this application is actually for him. I know that Phil, he uses the same password for all of his logins. So I wanted to help him a little bit. So I wanted to create a password generator for him. These are the requirements that I wanted the application to do. The first one is should be take the number of characters we want in that password and the number of numbers. Do some printing just for debugging purposes, and then generate a string, a random string, based on the number of characters and the number of numbers that we have entered. And also create a unit test that tests part of that application. Now, I am very lazy, so I was not going to code that and see if the AI could help me generate a test for just the testing part for it. So I made it to generate the entire application. And this is using OpenAI's natural language to Python code, which is basically you tell it what to do, and okay, wasn't supposed to go into full screen, but anyways, let's see. And this is what it did. Basically, it started generating code for me, which is fantastic. This is very cool technology, and it should not be dismissed. But the question is, what about the result that it did? I mean, you can see it generated everything. It even generated the test. So let's see, I'm just trying to find the mouse. Oh, no. Let's do it like that. No. That's what I want. Okay, sorry for that. Now, I looked at the code that it generated, and I was asking myself, is that good code? And my initial thought, yeah, I mean, it works. It does exactly what I told it to do. But would that work in a real production environment or a real-world application? Not really. First of all, I don't think it's smart enough to understand the coding style that you have in your company. And other thing is that it doesn't cover everything when it comes to testing. For example, it's not creative as we are. If I don't specify exactly what it should write in the correct terms, it will not generate that for me. And there's also no notion of what are the security holes that may be implied if we would use it in a real application. So I would say we should be very cautious using such a tool. I mean, everybody can be a programmer now, but if someone wants to be a test developer or a real developer, should not really try and use these applications because they would be missing out on a lot of knowledge. It could be fun to just generate some snippets of code But for testing, I'm not really convinced yet. But who knows? It might improve in the future, because we still need that human touch when it comes to testing, because it's a very creative process. So if we tie it all back to that AI that we talked about in the beginning, was it right? Well, a couple of things. The cloud is a complete different environment from the traditional testing environment. You got that right. And cloud-based applications are often constantly and changing and evolving, which is actually correct. And it's hard to keep up with the latest changes, which is also correct. So I'm actually very impressed by the text that it generated about that topic. And with that said, I would just like to thank Tesena for inviting me here, and my plane control team for some of the inspiration. And special thanks to some people, Elizabeth and Frederick, that helped me with some questions regarding this topic. Now, you can ask me anything, or just give me compliments. That's all fine. Okay. What is your favorite scam? Automation tool. They are all a scam. I mean, you have to show me an automation tool that works in every scenario. I mean, first of all, I don't think it's a scam. I mean, test automation does have its place, but you need to understand where you will automate. In the beginning of, for example, a new product, a new project, which is constantly changing, you'll spend a lot of time writing test automation code, which will then in 2 weeks be invalid because the product is always changing. I don't have a scam tool, and I wouldn't dare to claim that some tool is a scam. Sorry. Yeah, that was Phil. He had to go to the bathroom. Well, he missed. Is he gone again? Yeah. Oh, there he is. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you missed the most fun part of the presentation. What is the tool you used for code generation? Did you do code review? So the tool that I used was in OpenAI. They have that natural language to Python code generator, and it is open for anybody to experiment with. So basically, any manager who wants to become a coder can just go in and type something, and it will generate code for him. That actually works, which is very cool. I mean, we shouldn't dismiss that technology. And yes, I did do a little bit of a code review after it generated. I mean, I was impressed that with the style it generated in, it wasn't completely random, but what I wasn't so impressed with was that I had to figure out how to formulate my sentences of what it has to do. Because if I would misstep and write something a little bit wrong in that sentence, it would generate something completely different. Okay. What tool do you use for chaos engineering? What scenarios are you testing? Well, we haven't actually gone to that part where we do chaos engineering. We have done it, but not willingly. It happens when incidents happen, when our cloud provider decides to do something crazy. But I have always been an advocate for trying it out. It's better that we try it out before it happens for real. And the scenarios basically that we are testing is that we have our clients that are always like sending requests to our backend. And sometimes one of these servers that handle the requests, they might end up in a bad state. And then after a while, the traffic just loads up because they are like queries that are coming in and they're not being handled. And then the load on the system or other parts of the system just goes up until it starts to scaling up for no apparent reason because there's nobody consuming these requests. So the thing we want to test is to make sure how can we handle such an incident that will happen? How can we be alerted faster? How can we be more proactive to see it coming before it hits a certain level? That's the kind of testing scenarios that we we would do. Do you currently use any AI power tools? Not for testing, actually. So we use AI power tools or machine learning tools for other parts of our organization. We work with music, so we use the machine learning tools to classify music, for example. And that is actually what machine learning is good for. If you give it a set of data and tell it this data should be tagged with this tags, and then you give it another type of data and tell it, hey, tag this data for me. And it's actually very good at doing that. Cloud resources are costly. Do you run performance load testing tests in the cloud or at home on your own testing environment? I would have to say that we try to run such tests in real production environment because it would be super expensive for us to run it in a more like staging cloud environment because simply it will never be able to simulate our real production environment. But we do put a lot of emphasis on the tools that we're able to monitor our production environment. And that means logs, graphs, and alerts. And that's kind of how we do it now. What was the most surprising bug defect you found related to? I mean, most of the major incidents, let me say, it's caused by our cloud provider. The other bugs is most of the time our own fault when we deploy something bad. So I would say, in general, the cloud provider actually do a good enough job. I mean, they are keeping up with their SLOs so that the uptime is 99-point-something%. But the most surprising bug, I mean, nothing really that comes to mind. That's a hard one. We've had like network-related bugs because of the internal networking. We had the one that I mentioned about that our cloud provider updated the database, so all of our dates got null. So that was a fun one. What do you like so much about your current job? Looking on your LinkedIn, oh the hell, that's a very good question. I ask myself. Well, first of all, I mean, I really like the company and the culture and my team. And I think if your team is not people that you want to work with, you wouldn't be there for that long. So I think that is like one of the most important things. The second important thing is that we are always trying to use the most cutting edge technology, which is very exciting. We don't get tired of it yet. And we are trying to solve a problem in our company, a worldwide problem with commercial music. And so far, it has actually been very fun. I'm still not tired yet. Thanks for the presentation. I love your robotic. Sorry. Maybe change career? Do you use existing cloud service or you will? No, we actually use Google's cloud platform. That's what we have built all of our platform on. And we use a lot of their services that they provide, which is actually also a risk if you want to move away from, example, Google's cloud platform. You're stuck with them unless you make some very generic application, but then maybe you won't be able to take advantage of the services that they provide. Thank you for the presentation. Why do you prefer, or Agile? You fell for that joke. Actually, I think that Agile is a good way of working, but it all depends on the mentality of the team. I mean, you can say that you are Agile as much as you want, but when something needs to happen right away, how Agile are you really? Are your team gonna fix that thing in 1 month? That's not very Agile. I think it depends on how your team work. And every team in our company, they work a little bit different depending on how they develop their application and how they release their application. Some teams can deploy any second, any time of the day. Some of other teams, like my team, we can only deploy twice a month. So it's a bit different. Agile is just a fun buzzword. What do you think about using cloud-based web and mobile testing platform, browser stack, or for testing? I actually had a slide about that I removed because cloud testing is actually not only by running your application or your test in your own cloud. Cloud testing is actually about like these applications that you can use. And we do use some part of them, like we use browser stack for web testing. And that's actually a really good tool and a fast and effective way to test one thing on a different kind of platforms very fast and get very fast response. Are there any acceptance tests if cloud provider delivers what was expected? That's a hard one. Acceptance test was expected. I mean, we always try to understand what is it that the cloud provider promises to provide, and we take that as the truth. It's like, okay, this is how it's going to work, and does it uphold? Does it work as it's supposed to be when we build our application? So that's how I would say that we don't really have any pure acceptance test because everything is always changing all the time. So yeah, that was it for me. Thank you very much. Hope you learned something.
Now, we have 10-minute break. And maybe that's the information for the online stream. I need to go here. We have 10-minute break, and then we will continue. And hello on online. We are back soon.
I'm surrounded. Can't stop for
Okay, welcome back. And I would like to introduce Phil Royston, who will have we have 3 keynote today, so he will be the closing keynote now. Phil, stage is yours.
Hi. I hope you're all feeling comfortable. I'm not. I haven't dressed like this for 2 years. When I came down the stairs this morning, my dog barked at me. He didn't recognize me. I have a pocket here, and I have no idea what it's for. Okay, why am I here? Well, Marcel made me, basically. Now, it's not that he forced me or ordered me to make a presentation. He always comes with a suggestion. And if anybody know Marcel, when he makes a suggestion, you just get carried on a wave of energy. So Marcel comes and he says, okay, I suggest you should make a conference presentation. And at that moment, the emotional part of my brain, and my internal motivation, one of the strongest one is appreciation. I want appreciation. Says, cool. Opportunity to get some appreciation. And then the core part of my brain that protected me against being eaten by tigers and eaten poisonous fruit for the whole of my life shouts, no, don't do it, it'll be a disaster. Then Marcel, he has a trick. Yeah? He engages the reason part of my brain, the latest invention in our brain, the reason part of my brain. Because my reason part of the brain just says, Marcel, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And Marcel always comes and he says, here's the conference presentation title. And it's always a question. And when you get a question, you switch from the emotional or from the run at fight and flight, you switch into some sort of reasoning. You say, okay, so what's the learning culture and why would I want to build one? So this is how it's always worked with our presentations. The first one was, is testing like electricity? I had no idea. And I had to do quite a lot of research to find out that testing isn't like electricity. Or is it? The next one is testing like breakfast. And then Marcel came with, is testing like sex? Now, I refused to do that one because I was worried my mother would see it on YouTube, and because she doesn't know it's about software testing, she'd think I was talking about sex. So I said, no. Then we had how to find and develop good software testers. Then Marcel came again with his testing like sex because it's Marcel. I again refused, and then this time he came with this one. What's a learning culture, and why should you try to build one? And when I got the conference presentation, I don't know the answer. So I have to do quite a lot of research. When I'm saying research, I do a bit of reading, I'm doing a bit of reflection, and I spend quite a lot of time trying to put together the answer to the question that Marcel gave me. Now, I think I know a little bit about software testing. And in the past, most of my presentations were about software testing. And as I'm doing my research, I'll obviously go to Google. I use Bing, but I didn't want to put that in the presentation. I go to Google and say, what's software testing? And in this case, I get 500 million results. I know nothing about learning. I'm not a learning expert. So when I started my research and went to Google and it said, how is it, 8 billion results, I knew I was in trouble. I knew this was going to be a hard job. But early on, I came across this quote. And I sort of copy-pasted it into OneNote. And during the process of trying to piece together what I was going to talk about, I came back to this quote. And it's Edward Hall calls the drive to learn the most basic drive in the human species. We actually said it's the same sort of basic drive like sex. I didn't want to put sex again in the presentation. We've already had sex twice together, so I thought it was a bit too much. So that was a joke. We already had sex twice, and that, okay. Right. And I was thinking about this quote. When I went further in my research, I came back to this quote and I said, why would Edward Hall, anthropologist, he studies human beings, why would he say that the drive to learn is one of the basic drives of the human species? Is it just a throwaway quote for Twitter? Or did he really mean it? So this is what I started to try and answer. Why is it the most basic drive of the human species? And now, why am I intrigued by this question? what's learning, how to build a learning culture. For Tesena, learning is like oxygen. We are a body shopping company. We provide resources to our clients. Our clients, when they request a resource, they're looking for someone who can solve a problem or help them make progress. Of course, you don't find at first the perfect resource, so the client sometimes makes a compromise, and there's some gap between what they need from the resource and what the resource already knows. So we have to support our resources in onboarding process on the project to get the extra skills and knowledge they need to be able to provide the right sort of service for the client, the right sort of service our guy actually wants to provide. So that's one problem we have with learning. But the other problem with learning we have is, for us, that project is short term. It could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be a year and a half. These days, a year and a half is not very long. Yeah? So after a year and a half, our guy will go to a different client, to a different project. They'll be testing a different application, which will be doing a different type of business. They'll be using different technology and tools. So what we have to do is also to think about getting our guys ready for the next project that might happen a year and a half in advance. So we've got two things we have to support. Our learning culture has to support two things. And it's really hard. And we really struggle with it. So what drives us to learn? Let's go back to our friend, Edward Hall. And before, that's what I want to try and answer in the presentation. But I want to start with, what's the expected outcome of learning? Now, do you all remember this experience in your life? The day you learned how to ride a bike. Yeah? I remember it. I was 4 years old. It's the first vivid childhood memory I have. 1969. The Beatles played their last live performance. Concorde had its first test flight. The first man walked on the moon. And Phil Royston, a 4-year-old child in the north of Britain, rode his bike for the first time. A great year for mankind. And I remember what happened. Yeah, my dad took me out on the road. Yeah, it's 1969. In 1969, it was perfectly normal for small children to learn how to ride bicycles in the middle of the road. So don't think my dad was kind of like some psychopath or anything. And he held on to the back of the bike, onto the seat, and he said into my ear, "Don't look down, keep pedaling." And off we went. And a few seconds later, because of course I was looking down and not pedaling, he said to me, "Don't look down, keep pedaling." So I started pedaling, I started looking like that. And then a few seconds later, he said, "Don't look down, keep pedaling." And there's some stress in his voice. And I realized he wasn't behind me anymore, he was a bit further behind. I was going on my own. And the sensation, the speed, I was going like 2 miles an hour. Yeah? But the speed, the world was flashing by me. I felt like I was flying. It was amazing. Yeah? And then my dad shouted, "Watch the corner, slow down." And I went round the corner, and I went further down the road, and eventually I stopped, jumped off the bike fell on the floor, and I was absolutely exhilarated. Amazing feeling. Now, would you say I can ride a bike if I've only done it once? For example, I need to ride that bike to school. So, can I ride a bike? Can I ride a bike to school? I've only ridden it once. Can I ride that bike to school? No, I still have to learn some techniques, some skills, get some skills and knowledge about how to ride a bike. I need to ride in traffic, I need to ride on the road, and so forth. And then if I go further in the bicycle story, maybe I want to ride a race, maybe I want to win a race. So I have to get even better at riding a bike. So learning is not about doing things once. Learning is to develop the capacity to reliably produce a certain quality of results. So you can ride it once, you can ride it to school, you can ride in the race, you can win the race. So you develop the capacity as you go along, as you're learning. It's about recreating ourselves to be able to do something we were never able to do. And very, very simple, if you don't like those long quotes, learning changes us. What's the expected benefits of learning? Well, simple economic theory. You have a workforce. And the workforce has something called human capital. And I had to write it on the slide because I can never remember what human capital is. It's the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and social qualities that allows that workforce to perform work which has economic value. That workforce is working for the company, it's producing economic value, so the organization has revenues, and if they're selling the economic value for more than they're paying for it, then they'll have profits. Now, Karl Marx had his labor value theory, and he says, if the company pays the employees fairly, they will have an income from providing that work. So imagine the company is generating revenues and profits. I'm getting income, then we go out and buy things. They go out and buy machines and factories, and I go out and buy a PlayStation and whatever. Yeah? And we're all paying taxes, so that has a big impact on the economy. And the economy has an impact on the standard of living. And if you add learning into that equation, and through learning, you change people either to do a different job that has a higher value, or you change people to do the same job in a more efficient and effective way, then you have more revenues and profits. You should, if you're being paid fairly, then you'll have more income. That has a positive impact on the economy, and that has a positive impact on the standard of living. So both governments and organizations invest heavily in education and learning. The learning and developed industry globally is worth $320 billion. That's a lot of money being invested in learning and development, just from organizations. And the second reason why you'd want a learning organization or a learning culture, and this comes from the Fifth Discipline book, which set off quite a big trend in the 90s, which was about learning organizations. In the 1990s, it's the principle of the whole book is the world is not just complicated, it's complex. It's so complex that nobody can actually predict what's going to happen next. Did anyone really expect a pandemic? Bill Gates was talking about it for sure. Did anyone expect Putin to invade Ukraine? Did anyone expect China's economy to go down? Nobody really predicted it. So change is unpredictable, and it's fast. And if you have an organization and you want it to continue being successful, then organizations need to be able to continuously learn and adapt to maintain their business success. So organizations cannot learn and adapt unless the people in it learn and change. So personal growth is the key to continued organizational success. Why is it hard to achieve? Well, the first problem is that learning is quite hard, and it stretches us, yeah? And it takes us out of our comfort zone. So it's just easier to stay in our comfort zone, no? This is why learning is quite hard. And the second quote is quite nice. It made me laugh when I read it. It says, people don't resist change. You know, if learning is a basic human drive, then we're driving ourselves to change. They resist being changed. So if you try and create a learning culture by forcing people to learn, it generally doesn't work. How do we learn? Now, I have a question on the next slide. It's a little bit of a learning exercise. I want you just to think about the first answer to the question that comes into your head. Don't think about it too much. Just first answer that comes into your head. What's best, experience or a degree? Now, I've seen this on LinkedIn several times, and it's always accompanied by this nice little video of two gentlemen playing ping pong. There's an older gentleman who's helpfully labeled as experience. He's older, has more experience, obviously, and a younger guy who's helpfully labeled as having a degree. And the video shows how the old guy completely wipes the floor with ping pong with the young guy. Yeah? The young guy's running all across the room, and the old guy's just standing there hitting the ball around. Yeah? And I could do a whole conference presentation on what's wrong with that video. But let's ask this question in a different way. What's best, experience or a degree? You're in the hospital lying on the operating table, and someone says to you, we have 2 doctors available today. One has a degree, and the other one doesn't have a degree, but he's got a lot of experience. Which one would you like to operate on you today? And it's even more stupid question, because if you think about a medical degree, it starts off with 8 years of study, followed by 3 to 8 years of practical experience. So even to get a medical degree, you need both learning, theoretical knowledge and practice. So it's a very stupid question. The next things I want to draw your attention to is these things which you see on LinkedIn quite often as well. Learning pyramid and the 70-20-10 model. Now the idea behind them is pretty much the same. It's saying that that practice helps you learn much faster than study. So for example, at average student retention rates for lecture is less than 10%, practice doing 75%. The 70-20-10 model is pretty much the same, 70% from experience, 20% from development relationships, so feedback and so forth, and 10% from coursework and training. Now, if you were to post one of these things on LinkedIn, you might be a bit disappointed by the reaction, because the learning pyramid is looks official because it's supported by the National Training Laboratories in America, but nobody ever found the research that it was based on. And in fact, it's copy-pasted from a book that was written in the 40s, that was written by a guy who was trying to sell audiovisual training. And even he, in his book, said, do not take this thing too literally. But at some point, somebody put percentages in it and said, this is how people learn. This is how best to learn. And the 70-20-10 model is based on a survey of 200 executives. 200. So maybe not too reliable. The model I would like to use, and I want to move quickly on from those two, is the learning cycle. And I came across this the first time when I read a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Now, this is a very, very nice book. I strongly recommend you read it. I'll put my glass down. In the Mindset book, she explains the difference between people who have a closed mindset and an open mindset, and shows the influence of that mindset on their growth. And she explains how learning is a combination of new understanding and new behaviors. And the learning cycle starts with learning some basic principles of the thing you want to do. Yeah, so you might go on a training course, you might read a book, you look at something on the internet, you'll talk to some friends, some colleagues, and then you'll start doing the thing. Now, some people skip this step completely, like me. I go straight into doing, but what happens in the doing is you take those principles, and if you remember when you were driving a car the first time, changing gear took a lot of conscious effort. Put my foot down, and put my foot up so it doesn't jerk, and get it into second. You really have to think about it. And what happens if you practice something, it becomes an unconscious activity. You can change gear without thinking about it. You don't even know what gear you're in half the time. It just happens, yeah? So in that process, practice, you turn the conscious effort into an unconscious, effortless activity. Then Carol says what happens next is very, very important, and this is the difference between an open and closed mindset person. You make a mistake, there's a failure, there's some sort of adversity if you even take it to a big level. And this is the point that the closed mindset person will say, no, Hansa told me to do that. Freddie over there didn't help me. I had the wrong equipment, and it was raining that day, it's not my fault. And either they will stop trying to do the activity, stop trying to learn this new activity, or they'll just continue doing it in the way they did it before, because they just don't accept that they made a mistake. The open mindset person, Carol says, goes into the next phase, which is reflection. They say, okay, I made a mistake. And the thing about making mistakes is, well, we don't see ourselves, it's been proven, we are very, very bad at seeing what's wrong with us and what mistakes we make. We see everybody else's faults and mistakes, but we don't see our own. It's actually proven in studies. So in this, when you make a mistake, it's in conflict with your self-belief. You have an ego that says, I'm good, I'm great, and then you see you've made a mistake, and it's actually very painful. And this is what makes it hard for the closed mindset person to deal with. But the open mindset person has some coping mechanism, he can deal with it. He goes into reflection, he makes sense about the problem, and he decides what he's going to do next, and he'll go back into the principles, and he'll keep going back around the circle. And that's the difference. And to be able to go around that very painful cycle again and again requires some intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means internal. It's not external, it's internal. Now, when I first presented this about 3 years in a conference, I thought it was great, and I thought I understood it, but I didn't. The first thing I didn't quite realize was that experience doesn't mean expertise. And I call this the experience paradox. I sound like a Big Bang Theory episode now, an experience paradox. But when we first started Tesena, we had the idea that we were going to change the testing world. And we started hiring people into the company. And we said, okay, we're going to change the software testing world. We need the best software testers. So we looked for people with experience. But when we interviewed those people who had experience, we found out they didn't know anything about software testing. They'd been working for 3 or 5 years as a software tester, but didn't know anything about software testing. It's because they hadn't studied any principles, and also because they never really realized they were doing it wrong. Yeah? So we went a different way. The next thing I didn't understand was, as I've said before, we can't really see our faults and we can't really see the mistakes we make. We can see them on others, is that most of the time you don't even realize you made a mistake. Yeah? And this is why feedback is actually kind. And this picture I use a lot on presentations because it for me, evokes the emotion of feedback. Again, you don't see your own mistakes, and somebody comes along to you and says, yeah, I don't think you did that very well. I think you could have done that another way. That hurts. That's a painful process. You can see on that lady's face. She's not very comfortable with this experience. And the guy on the other side, he's not evil. He understands that it's uncomfortable for the other side because he doesn't like feedback either. So it's really uncomfortable for him to give feedback. So what do? We don't give it. We think it's nicer not to say anything. The next thing I didn't understand was how important the reflection is. Yeah? And we don't take any time to reflect. And I have to say I like doing conference presentations mostly because it forces me to spend several weeks reflecting on what I did in the past. And I realize always that something I did a few years ago, which I thought was brilliant, I started to realize it wasn't so good. Yeah? Only through that moment of reflection, that wasn't so great, was it? I could have done that better. So it's also important to catch the fact you've made mistakes. And it's also important to spend that time thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? And maybe what could I benefit from this new knowledge that I was doing something wrong? And again, this intrinsic motivation. What's that all about? And I go back to the fifth discipline because they explain it in a very nice way. I'm going to put my clicker down. And imagine a rubber band, yeah? One of your exercise bands, which you all have at home. Yeah? And imagine that this hand is your current reality. This is where you are now. And you set a goal, and that's your vision. You want to go up there. And as you pull the rubber band apart, there's some tension. Not tension like stress, but tension like a force. And tension likes to be resolved. So what could happen is this hand will go there, or that hand will go down. So you start off, you've got this tension, and you start making progress towards your vision. Things will go wrong. Yeah? So what could happen is you're making progress, you'll say, okay, open mindset person, I didn't do that right. I can think, there's a different way to doing it. Yeah? And they'll keep going. They'll do it a different way, and they'll keep making progress towards the vision. Or you can say, okay, what I've realized from that mistake is I'm not where I thought I was. I thought I could do this and I could do that, but I can't. I've realized that my current reality is not what I thought it was. Or you can think, these are not the right visions. This is not the right goals. I need to look for something else. So they make a correction. But they've still got the tension. They're still going to go somewhere. And then the closed mindset person unfortunately goes, I'm no good. I can't do this. There's no way I could ever do that. And what they'll do is they'll adjust the vision down towards the current reality, and the next time they make a mistake, they'll do it again. It's a reinforcing cycle, and basically they just stay where they are. Now, so what you need to be able to enable this to work is we need to know where we are. We need to internally understand where we are, and we need to set our own goals. These are our goals. The creative tension you don't create externally. It's an internal thing. And you need to be able to react properly to that emotional tension. When a mistake happens, it's an emotional event, and that creates a different sort of tension, which may either make the vision go down or make some readjustment. And the learning journey. Okay, here I am. I'm a man who can run 3 kilometers. And I decide I'm going to run a half marathon. Yeah? So I start, and what do I feel when I've created that emotional tension? I've set a goal for myself. I feel anticipation. I'm excited. I've got a goal here. I'm going to run a half marathon. I'm thinking about crossing the finishing line, people cheering and waving, say, hey, Phil, you ran a half marathon. And I start making progress towards that goal. On the day of the race, I'm stood at the start line. I'm nervous. I'm nervous before I start this presentation. I've never done it before. I've never run a half marathon before. I've done the training. I've prepared, but I've never done it before. I'm still nervous. And I'm nervous in a half marathon because I've only ever run 16 kilometers in training. There's still 5 kilometers I never ever ran. Yeah? And I start in the race. And it's hard. And there's great moments, but it's pretty hard. And you cross the finishing line, and what do you feel? Euphoria? No. You only feel relieved. It's over. Yeah? And the next thing that happens is, before you started this process, you were the guy that could run 3 kilometers. And after the process, you're a guy that can run a half marathon. And really, after a short time, you feel no extra joy from that fact. You adapt to that new reality. Yeah, so that So where's the joy in that process? And the joy is in the journey is more important than the destination, because it's the bit I skipped over, the progress. Yeah? I start off at 3 kilometers. I go out, I start training. Then I can run 4. Then I can run 5. Big breakthrough, I can run 10. Then I can run 10 pretty easily without dying afterwards. And then I can run 10 in a reasonable time. And then I start doing 12, 14, 16. And it's a continuous process. I'm getting feedback the whole time. I'm making progress. When you have sex, and I'm sorry to say sex again, or eat a meal, you feel pleasure, yeah? But it's very short-lived. But this process gives you a continuous feeling of progress, and it's gratification. It's different to pleasure. It's gratification. Okay, something can go wrong, you get injured. You could stop trying to run, you could stop trying to train, but you know, if it's a strong enough goal, yeah, you'll make adjustments, yeah? You'll try and correct your technique, you'll do some cross-training, whatever, and you'll make adjustments and so you can continue on to your goal. So the progress towards your goal is actually where you get the most gratification. How to deal with failure and setbacks? Well, when I presented Carol Dweck's learning cycle a few years ago at a conference presentation, people came up to me after and said, can you change from being closed mindset to open mindset? And I said, yes, because I'm the example, I said. Yeah? But I didn't know how. And I'm back to that reflection. Yeah? Optimistic people are naturally open mindseted. If you're by nature optimistic, and it is by nature, you're optimistic, then you're more likely to be open mindset. If you're pessimistic, then you're more likely to be a closed mindset person. What pessimists can do is, when something goes wrong, is to not feel powerless, not to feel like a victim, but like to take that moment and switch it. This is an opportunity for me to improve. And I tried that, and for me it was a moment of great power. Yeah? I was out running, I fell down. Yeah? And before that I would stand up and say, oh God, some tree roots, or stupid mud, or wrong shoes. And then I said, okay, what did I do wrong? Yeah, I need to adjust how I'm running when it's this sort of terrain. Yeah? So then it's a very, very powerful moment, and you make it a moment for improvement. So even a pessimistic person, if they just take time for reflection and try and find an opportunity from that failure, then you'll make a lot of progress to being open mindset. So if learning's so hard, so risky to our self-esteem, why do we do it? What's the meaning of life? You know The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer was 42, and Monty Python's The Meaning of Life was try to be nice to people, and so on. Now we laugh, because the meaning of life is the ultimate question, and we know the answer won't be so easy. Yeah? So when it's 42, or just be nice to people, we sort of laugh. But what we actually, as human beings, are doing, all the time, is we're trying to find purpose in our lives. And that's quite a big difference, and that's something we can actually achieve. Because we go through life seeking happiness and meaning. And also we like to make shit happen. I hope that's going to be bleeped out on YouTube. My mother will be shocked. But we like to make shit happen. It's the effectiveness motive. It's not just human beings, it's actually a lot of mammals. Children play and they build things. Yeah? And they like to change the environment around them. Okay, so I learn how to build a wall. That means I can build a shelter for myself. Yeah? By learning to build a wall, I can change the environment around me. And so I want to change my definition of what's the expected outcome of learning by saying it enables us to change our relationship with the situation around us, which can bring happiness and joy. Why can it bring happiness and joy? I'm going to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know it, but just to refresh our memories, it's an old model, it's full of holes, but I think it basically applies. Yeah? So if you look at each of those levels, yes, physiological needs, I've got water, I've got food, it's an environmental thing. Yeah? And if I can change my environment through learning, then I can reach that level of happiness. If I've got personal security, if I manage to improve my health, I've got property. Again, it's an environment thing which I can achieve through learning. Love and relationship, okay, I'll skip over that one. Esteem, yeah? I've got respect, recognition. Yeah? I'm a project manager. Yeah? I'm a CEO of a software testing company. So if I just take modern world and how it can help modern work and see and try and describe how it can make it happy, let's start with a basic level of employment, a job. By definition, it's Taylorism, turn of the century, second industrial revolution, closely supervised, low complexity. I'm on a production line, I do this all day, or I do this all day. Yeah? and somebody's telling you all the time, do it faster, do it this way, yeah? Or you've got a job, any sort of job, and you just do it for the money. And that can cover your physiological and safety needs. You have a job, if you do it well enough, you'll have enough money to solve the bottom 2 levels of your hierarchy of needs. But the problem is with that, and studies shows that people who are just in it for the money or in that sort of environment, they feel alienation, they feel powerlessness, they feel the dissatisfaction, and they're not engaged in the work. Basically, they're not happy. Studies show that people who are just chasing money are less happy than people who are chasing some other need. Let's go to career. Yeah? So you set your career goals, and you make progress towards them. This is my generation's driving force. We were career-driven, yeah? And that helps you with your esteem, yeah? I become a project manager, I become a test manager, whatever. So that helps you with your esteem. But I still haven't covered belonging, social connection, and self-actualization. Where do I get those from in work? And, okay, for the career, I just skipped over it. Yeah, that doesn't make you too happy either because you feel you're in the rat race. It's not all worth it. Yeah, so I'm still looking for something else, which is belonging and self-actualization. Where can I find that in my work? And there's this third level of employment, which is a calling. So you have a job. Some people have a job. Some people have a career. And some people have a calling. Their work is their calling. Where does that come in? To help me explain that, I'm going to a different model of happiness. In the 1950s, a new movement in psychology started, which is called positive psychology. Up to that point, psychologists had only been interested in what makes us miserable. Yeah? Freudian psychology. These guys came along and said, hey, let's turn the tables. Let's try and work out what makes us happy. Yeah? And they have a happiness formula. And they say that happiness is the sum of your biological happiness set range. Each of us have a high and low point set, fixed by our genes of happiness. Some people are over there, some people are here, some people are over there. And you can be less miserable, more happy. Add to that the conditions of your life. Yeah? These are things like the color of your skin, your sex, though these days that can change. These are things which don't change, yeah? And things that do change. Where you live, who your friends are, if you're married. So conditions of your life that do change, but they don't change so frequently. It's like for a period of life, they stay the same. And what's most important for your happiness is voluntary actions. And this is what you do, what you choose to do. And why is it important to choose the right activities? And we come to this thing called flow. Yeah? Flow was not discovered, but understood first by somebody called, and I have to pronounce this carefully, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think it's called, yeah? And it's a state of being. I've already talked about it, my moment on the bicycle. My progress towards doing a half marathon. These are the moments where you have a challenge that's very closely aligned to your strengths. And it gives you a feeling of effortless, focus, satisfaction, control in the moment because you constantly gain feedback, you're making progress, and you're doing things the right way. Yeah? And if you give people this type of job, they'll be much happier than if they're doing something that doesn't give them this feeling. So this flow, these voluntary activities are very happy. And the final piece of the puzzle, because I'm getting bored talking, so I'm sure you're getting bored listening, is self versus common good. We are a very strange species. You've heard of Darwinism. Survival of the fittest. Okay. So instead of standing nicely in a queue for the food or at the coffee machine, we should be fighting each other to get to the coffee machine or to the food first. We should be fighting each other to find the right mate, the best mate. This is what Darwinism is all about, but we don't behave like that. Why? Because 80 to 100,000 years ago, there was a genetical change in our brains that allowed us to start working in groups and not compete, within that group, not compete with each other. And this is a very, very powerful force in humankind. This is part of our cultural, not genetical evolution. There's two types of evolution. Cultural evolution. We like to belong to a group. And why? Because the group has some common good, some common goal. And we like to be part of that group and try and help the group achieve that goal. This gives you the sense of connectedness to things outside yourself and to people outside yourself. And it's a very, very important force. So the ultimate drive to learn, when work brings us outside ourselves and brings us into connection with people and projects beyond ourselves, and it can happen in any type of work, job, career, calling, There are studies of hospital cleaners who have a calling. It's the most menial, horrible job in the world, probably, to clean toilets in a hospital, but they have a calling because they can see the effect of their work on the health and the recovery of the patients in the hospital. So they treat it as a calling. It's a higher goal. And if you're going to have the ultimate drive to learn, then it's about alignment. Okay, we can be relatively happy if things aren't aligned, but if you get everything in line, then you'll be the happiest. So I'm doing well, is the bottom of the slide there. I've got some income, I'm wealthy enough, and I've got my personal advantages. And that covers the bottom three, oh, not the bottom three, 3 tiers of the hierarchies, of the Maslow hierarchy. And then if you've got on top of that, you're doing something that gives you flow, then you're going to be even more happy. And then on top of that, you're doing something that also contributes to a bigger thing, a higher calling, then you're going to have this connectedness and belonging. So if you get those things aligned, then you'll have the ultimate drive to learn. So my summary slide, to try and put it together. You have to understand, first of all, if you're going to build a learning culture, well, you can't. People are like plants, yeah? A plant will grow if you give it the right conditions. And it's the same for people, yeah? So you have to understand that motivation is intrinsic, it's inside, yeah? You have to support their intrinsic motivation. You can't force it. If you force it, it's counterproductive. And you have to embrace our human behavior in our search for personal happiness, belonging, and meaning. And because we don't see ourselves and our own faults, then you have to support people in understanding where they are and where they're going. This is like a development conversation. Yeah? Just talk to people about where they are so they can understand where they are and where they're going. You don't tell them where they are, you don't tell them where they're going, but you help them understand it. And then you try and help them find opportunities for alignment. Okay, you want to do that, that's your goal, and our company wants to do that. So we're in alignment, so you can get this feeling of alignment. Or better still, just set the organization's goals according to everybody's individual goals. Allow people to do work aligned with their strengths, so they can achieve flow. Treat mistakes as an opportunity, not a failure. Don't go around criticizing people that made mistakes. Treat them as a learning opportunity. Understand feedback is kind, because we don't see the mistakes we make. It's corrective, never negative. And the most important thing, which in our fast-paced world, our fast-paced businesses we have now, is to give people time for reflection. Because we don't have time for reflection. There's always another task. There's always another thing. There's always another deadline. We never stop to reflect. Yeah? You have to stop, reflect, and make sense and adjustment. I have a final quote, which you can read on the YouTube video playback, and which books to read. This is largely based on these 4 books. I would definitely strongly recommend the second book there. I didn't mention it in the presentation, but it does explain very well what makes us happy, what doesn't make us happy. And it's coffee time, or is it? It's wine time. Okay, thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing your feedback. You can find me on LinkedIn or at the coffee machine, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thank you. I can't do a TED Talk because the slides are for me. You've noticed TED Talks don't have slides, or maybe one, and I have lots of slides. The slides are there for me, not for you. Because I have a terrible memory and I don't know what I'm supposed to say, so I need the slides to guide me through. So I can't do TED Talks. But I'd like to. That sounds cool. I'd get lots of appreciation, no? No, I'd be a disaster. Is testing like sex? Opinions? No opinions? I didn't have opinion either. What makes me happy? As I said before, appreciation. If I'm in a situation where I get positive, it makes me a terrible yes man, because people come to me and say, Phil, will you do this? And I say, oh yes, I'll do it. Yeah, and then later I go, oh God, I can't do it. I haven't got time or whatever. But I really, what makes me happy is getting some appreciation. And this is how I won a Best Speaker Award at Eurostar a few years ago, because I was explaining how much I needed appreciation, and I told everybody to vote for me. And I saw everyone take the phones out and say, oh Phil, we'll give him some appreciation. And I won. I was the best speaker. Not that I was the best speaker, I just manipulated everybody. Yeah. So that's what makes me happy. And wine, of course. And running. And cycling. For me, it was reflection. Really, it was the third presentation that was there, the how to find and develop good software testers, made me really go back into my past and go through my own development process, which was largely based on experience. I mean, I literally overnight I was made a test manager. I'm a developer, yeah, and not a modern developer, so don't try and hire me. I don't know. Oh, if you've got a COBOL project, maybe I can help you. Yeah, but basically I was on a project. I did a migration in a bank, and I was funny, I think, and they asked me to stay on as a test manager. This is why I was angry later, years later, about like, how can you get a developer to be a test manager? That doesn't make any sense. But I became the test manager. I read 3 things on Google, and I started being a test manager. Yeah. So and then I was kind of like lucky that I had some successes, and then people started calling me like the best software tester around, and I believed them. So I became quite egotistical, and only when I did ISTQB foundation level and the test manager, because I was curious, I did those 2 certificates. I realized that I wasn't the guy that invented software testing, that somebody had beaten me to it and actually invented it a lot better than I had. So that was through the reflection I actually came to that realization that I shouldn't believe people when they tell me I'm amazing. You can't. I think, okay, I'm not saying Tesena is a perfect company, far from it. Yeah, we're on a learning journey. I'm going to take all these things I've actually learned now, and I'm going to try and apply them to Tesena. I'm sorry, people from Tesena. Some turbulent times are coming. I'm going to maybe try and do things in a different way based on what I've done here. Can it be taught? No, I think you can demonstrate it. You can be a model. Yeah? You can say, okay, go to people you can see struggling accepting mistakes or react badly to mistakes and say, okay, it's like a coaching conversation. Yeah, okay, you think this situation and you think that, and let me explain how I used to be, and I used to be like that, and how I tried to switch. I think it's only through those learning conversations, and it is a learning conversation, that you can share your experience and people can be more motivated to change their mindset. And hopefully something like this sort of presentation, like maybe a little bit opens people's eyes that there is a problem there, and you don't realize it. And if you realize that that sort of situation can occur, then once you're aware of something, then you can start to be able to change it. As I say, you don't know you're making mistakes. You don't know you're behaving the way you are. When you become aware that there's a possibility that that's true, then you can move on. Is it not wine time yet? Thank you.
Not yet. Testing, raz, dva, tri. Okay, so the show is almost over, but not yet. I have a couple of slides still. Is testing like sex? No, I don't have the talk. Somebody closed my slide. Find the right one. So, maybe I'll start with some practical information before I will use my slides to tell you some more other stuff. We closed the Q&A session, and now we open a poll to give us feedback. So please use the same Slido app and tell us what we could improve, how do you like the talks, and so on. It's same for online and offline attendees. So we want to make that next Tesena Fest even better. Even better, I hope you will like this one. I don't manipulate the results as Phil did. But please use the app and give us some feedback, or find me somewhere around and tell me how did you like it. I would like to thank you, all the online attendees. As I said, the show is over for today. These are the amazing speakers and workshop leaders. I would like to thank you them to joining us today or online. And I would like to ask Phil, Pia, and Maravan coming back to the stage, because I would like to personally thank you. Who will be the first? Okay. So these are the flowers. I think it's more practical than. Thank you.
And I prefer wine more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I will just maybe remind you that if you would like to join us for the next sessions, on Friday there is a workshop which will be more technical and hands-on for you or for your colleagues, run by Radek Bednařík about Playwright. So if you want to try some new shiny tool, there will be workshop on Friday afternoon. And in October, there will be Cypress workshop. So if you still don't using it and you would like to try how it works, we have half-day session for that one. And in October, we are also hosting similar event in Vienna. So I'm really looking forward for that one as well. And I would like to also thank you, all the partners and all the companies who help us to make it happen. So thanks for contributing, especially they people spend a lot of effort and also promote us on the social media. So I would like to thank you all there. And thank you that you agreed to become a part of program during the roundtables. And also then thank you online visitors to following us. I have one more thing for online attendees and for you. Next week, there is great conference in Bratislava. So if you would like to party for 2 days, there is BREX, Sanae BREX conference with a lot of professional content, but a huge amount of fun around that. So that's, I think they are closing, or they already closed the on-site registration, but there is also still online stream available. So if you are interested in the talks and topics, I think there is 30% discount for this night. Is it like that? And if you are interested, just let me know and I'll connect you to the guys. These are the speakers for the next Vienna session. We'll be talking about whether test managers are still needed. That was also a topic of some of the roundtables and Pia's talk. And also we will see some other projects from Erste Group, how they build a banking platform, and also discussing how and whether to balance between manual and automation testing. So the show is over. I would like to now say hello to online attendees. Maybe let's try to clap last time. And this is, I'll wait until we will be